at Richmond Palace on the 21st of April 1509, my father, Henry VII of England, died. He knew the end was coming. He'd been ill with tuberculosis for months. Day by day, he'd got weaker and weaker. Early that day, he'd heard Mass, and since then, he'd prayed relentlessly for the salvation of his soul. At a little past 11 o'clock at night, I became King of England. I was just 17 years of age, a minor. That meant that I could not rule England on my own. It meant one thing, a regency. And history tells us that English regencies do not go well. Greetings, loyal subjects. So I'm going to talk in this video about the 3 regencies that took place when I was king. All of them were women. Never before, since the time of Eleanor of Aquitaine, when she acted as regent for her son Richard the Lionheart, had a woman been in control of the kingdom. But during my own reign, 3 women were. So the first happened immediately when I became king. It was just 2 months to go until I turned 18 and I could legally rule myself. So really, when my grandmother, Margaret Beaufort, stepped into the breach and became regent, she was really just a technicality. Nobody was going to really question my right to rule. There I was, a tall, strapping, healthy, charismatic 17-year-old young man who in a matter of weeks would turn 18. Nobody was going to stand against me, obviously. But for the legalities, there needed to be a regent. So who better than my grandmother? It was through Margaret Beaufort that the Tudors actually had their somewhat tentative claim to the throne of England. So my grandmother filled the breach and acted as regent. Immediately she set up the marriage between myself and Catherine of Aragon. Remember, Catherine had been previously married to my elder brother Arthur before Arthur's untimely death of the sweat. Myself and Catherine married in a private service on the 11th of June 1509 at the Church of the Observant Friars just outside Greenwich Palace. Then just a few days later, on the 24th of June, we were crowned together as King and Queen in Westminster Abbey. On the 28th of June, I turned 18, and now I could legally rule. Just one day later, on the 29th of June, my grandmother died. She fulfilled her role as regent. She had organised my father's funeral, my wedding, my coronation, and seen out her time until I turned 18, and then the very next day she died? Is that something more than coincidence? Isn't that a very strange story? It was as though it was Margaret Beaufort's destiny to see me secure on the throne, and then she could leave this earth. My second regency occurred in the year 1513. Like any good young English king, I was keen to set off and wallop the French. So if I was leaving the country to invade France, I needed a regent to rule at home. There was but one choice. My wife, Catherine of Aragon, the Queen. And on the 11th of June 1513, I appointed Catherine of Aragon governor of the realm and captain general. Turns out when I left for France, she would have a slightly more difficult time of it than me. I gained victory in one rather insignificant battle called the Battle of the Spurs. However, back at home, Catherine was having one or two problems. The Scots were playing up. The Scots had something called the Old Alliance with France, and they weren't happy that I was off invading their friends. And so they gave Catherine 1 month's written notice of their intention to invade. She made all the preparations that she possibly could. And on the 3rd of September 1513, the Scots invaded. Catherine ordered Thomas Lovell to raise an army in the Midlands. Catherine rode north in full armour, despite being heavily pregnant, echoing memories of her mother, and she addressed the troops. She couldn't fight in battle, of course, so Thomas Howard, the Earl of Surrey, commanded the forces. Catherine herself commanded the reserve line in the Midlands. The resulting Battle of Flodden was the largest ever engagement between Scotland and England. It resulted in the deaths of around 11,000 Scots, including the Scottish King James IV. Catherine, who history often represents as being a very meek, mild, well-mannered lady, she wanted to send me a gift to celebrate her success. She wanted to send me the body of the King of Scotland. She was persuaded that probably that wouldn't be a good idea, and instead she sent me his coat that was stained with his blood. I used it as a banner going in front of my own forces. Catherine, it has to be said, had a very successful regency. The third and final regency of my reign occurred for a short period between July and September of 1544. Again, I was off to wallop the French. This time, I left my final queen, Catherine Parr, in charge of the kingdom. I managed to take the town of Boulogne during this campaign, so it was moderately more successful than my earlier attempts. Catherine Parr had a far quieter time than Catherine of Aragon. The Scots behaved themselves. She ended up signing 5 royal proclamations. She headed the Regency Council with great skill. Catherine's greatest achievement during those few weeks running the kingdom was actually the influence she had on her stepdaughter. Elizabeth was watching everything that she did, and she could see that a woman could lead. Those few weeks probably told Elizabeth everything that she needed to know about queenship, how to rule. Me leaving for France and appointing Catherine Parr regent was possibly my greatest achievement.